Okay, so we're going to talk about umbrella on Shabbat, and there's a question like, why is it important? Yeah, you could say, okay, I'm not going to use umbrella on Shabbat, and other people would say I would use umbrella on Shabbat. But the importance of this issue, more than the decision whether yes or not to use it on Shabbat, is really the methodology of halakha. Meaning, how do the rabbis approach an issue? They have a question, they have a process. Why do they decide A on one and B on another? What is going through their minds? So, in order to understand that, first I went a little bit through the history of the umbrella, and that is, we have to understand, where does it come from? It's everything. Everything starts with history. If you don't know history, and this was a key factor for Sephardic rabbis, the knowledge of history says you cannot dissociate history from halakha. Rabbi Meshash, for example, I think I mentioned it once, wrote an introduction to the Sefer Shalot Utshuvot of Rabbi Yitzhak ben Walid. Rabbi Yitzhak ben Walid is one of the greatest Moroccan rabbis. His grandchildren printed the book, and Rabbi Meshash wrote a review. And he said the great grandchildren did a beautiful job in printing the book. However, what is missing from the book in the introduction, where they speak about all the miracles and the greatness of Rabbi Yitzhak ben Walid, is historical details. He says, you didn't write, even though he knew that, but he wanted them to put it in the book. When and where did he live? He says, if you don't know where this rabbi lived and what time, you cannot understand his halakha. So he says, you have to look at it in historical context. And that is also my argument today with many people who say, we follow Maimonides. I say, I also follow Maimonides. The question is, if Maimonides would follow Maimonides today, meaning Rambam wrote what he wrote 800 years ago, 900 years ago. If he lived today, would he say the same exact things? Probably not. Probably he would look at all the rabbis today, says 90% of you are disqualified and I don't want to hear what you have to say because you don't keep your ears and eyes open to the changes in society and in halakha. So this is the importance of history. So what is the history of the umbrella? It started in the Far East. There's evidence from almost more than 2,000 years ago that they already had collapsible umbrellas, which is in China. It's a minor technological wonder. Like you pull a string and all these pieces come together. When I was a kid, there was still a guy in Yerushalayim in the shuk, Yosef Peretz, metaken mitriot. When you metaken mitriot, people would fix their umbrellas. People would fix their umbrellas, but it only came to Europe in the 1600s. And originally, if you look at paintings, people would have the umbrellas were not collapsible; they were very heavy, and you had to have a servant walk behind you with a long pole. So not everybody could afford it. But in the 1600s, 1700s, they started producing the collapsible umbrellas. In the 1700s, a French manufacturer was able to produce one which was not too heavy. It was about 2 pounds. And you could carry it and go with it around. So once that started, people, of course, the rabbis had to address the issue because now on Shabbat you have this strange technological device. You could say one of the first major inventions in the modern era that everybody used. There were other inventions. There was the steamboat, the cotton gin, the mechanical loom, right? But all of them were limited usage. Where do you use? Like if you're a farmer, you use the combine or the harvester, the cotton gin. The steamboat you use only if you travel. Steam powered mills also only question before Pesach. But umbrella you carry every day. So the question was, could you carry it on Shabbat? And you will see that many people did originally. Many observant Jews carried umbrella on Shabbat. Yes.
How this comply in the halacha say you can lift a sofa 10th floor? It's not.
Wait. Yes.
And big umbrella.
You're right. So it's not about that. They were saying, and we'll get to. I don't even get into the reasons why they say it's forbidden, but just of the general overview. But generally, they say it's like you're building a tent and you're carrying a tent around. And then there was the problem of eruv. But they said that even if you have the umbrella open before Shabbat, you cannot carry it on Shabbat. So it seems like the final outcome today, when you ask people, can you use an umbrella on Shabbat or not? It's a clear-cut line. Orthodox people, observant people, do not use umbrellas on Shabbat. If someone comes with an umbrella, they look down at him. Some people will not tell him anything. They will just say, oh, the poor guy, he doesn't know. They come over to him. They say, you want us to show you where the Siddur, where the Kaddish is? He says, no, I know how to pray perfectly. So, but you have the umbrella. Other people would yell at the person. There were cases where, people were rebuked openly. Like, how can you do that? It's forbidden. And they yell and shout at them. So, but before we get to that, and I said I want to talk about the methodology, it's worth it to look at the history of another device, and that's the watch. Because this is around the same time, a little earlier than the umbrella, and it's more or less on the same it has the same qualifications. It's something that everybody uses, right? It's a new invention that didn't exist before, and now everybody could carry it around, and it has this technological inner workings. Now, if you think about the complications of a watch versus an umbrella, the watch is much more complicated, much more sophisticated. If you want to wind your watch on Shabbat, you're setting in motion a whole system of gears and fine machinery that should have been forbidden. And why is it that what we have, we have the umbrella, everybody's sort of against, and with the watch, everybody is okay with. So the interesting thing that when the first reference to a watch in halakha is made by Rabbi Yosef Karo in Shulchan Aruch, and he says, "Yesh leistapek more sha'ot, kli more sha'ot." The one literally indicates the hours. More sha'ot. It's from literal translation from orologos. The logos, the knowledge of hours. Orologin, right? Right, but he used the word relozio. Right, he says in Laz, in Ladino, relozio, which come from Spanish reloj, which is the also from the orologo in Greek. And he says, "Yesh leistapek im mutar letaltelo b'Shabbat." It's a question. This is Shulchan Aruch 308. He says that if you could, because it's muktzeh, maybe. He says whether it uses sand, which means an hourglass, or any other kind. It doesn't specify what other kinds. It says Yesh leistapek. It's questionable if you could do it or not. But the Rema, Rabbi Moshe Yisrael, says pashat minag leisur. Everybody agrees it's forbidden. So, you look today at observant people on Shabbat, most people, 99%, have a watch. So, less than 100 years after after this was written, we find in a rabbi who was born in Poland, lived in Austria, Rabbi Meir Eisenstadt, writes the following. He says, הנה חכם אחד אסר לטלטל זג האור בשבת. Zager is a watch, but it actually the original word was zag hour, tell hours, and then it was shortened to Zeiger. So he says you cannot carry a watch on Shabbat, and he says, and he quotes the Shulchan Aruch. He says, מי שמורה על השעות שקוראים רוליו אסור לטלטל בשבת. ואמר החכם האוסר ששם רוליו הוא לשון ספרדי הכולל אור, כל מיני אורן אסורים לטלטל. So now they are debating the Spanish term that Rabbi Yosef Karo used, and they misquote it. They call it rolio, maybe Rolex. But he says relozio, reloj. Now they say, what did he refer to? So that rabbi, the rabbi who said it's forbidden, he says it includes all watches, all timepieces. And he says, "V'anuchi pilpalti imo b'chokhma, sheman demekeh lo mafsid." I wrote, he says, Rabbi Eisenstadt says, I wrote that if you're lenient and you allow it, it's okay, because he only mentions an hourglass, and the Magen Avraham, a commentator on the Shulchan Aruch, says only a sundial. So you're going to go with the sundial in your pocket and you take it out to see what time it is, right? But this is not true, not accurate, because Shulchan Aruch said any type of timepiece, right? And so the argument of Rabbi Eisenstadt to say that it would be more of a problem to use an hourglass or a sundial than a mechanical watch is that to use a sundial or hourglass, you have to intervene. You have to hold it. You have to tilt it, right? Meanwhile, a mechanical watch is set from before Shabbat, and you do nothing, which really sort of is a counter argument. Is the exact opposite. There's no mechanical apparatus in the sundial or the hourglass, and there is one in the. But here's the sentence that I think really is the key to the whole issue. He says, "Kol ikar." He says, "Lama yu alalu asurim." He says, "I don't see reason to forbid," meaning that he already feels like I need to make it permissible. And he says, "Kol ikar isul titur shekatav Shulchan Aruch." The whole issue of carrying it, rak al pi minhag, it was a custom. Ubazeh lo kiblu aleim haYehudim et hilal isur. Says, and the Jews, the observant Jews, did not accept the custom of not carrying any watch, only the sundial and the hourglass. And he says, "Kmo sheraiti bekama kehilot," and now he speaks about reality. He says, in reality, afilu lomdim kshedorshim barabim lokhem mikisan ha'uren. Even when the rabbis, when they teach or learn, they take out the watch on Shabbat. Ubazman hazeh en lecha adam she'en lo sha'a. That's a nice wordplay. The original in Pirkei Avot, they say every person has his time, meaning, or in a more negative way in Arabic, you say kul kal bijiyomo. But I mean, this is the negative. But in the positive is like, or Andy Warhol, everybody will have a 15 minutes of fame. This is the original gist of the idea.
And the casino is no watch.
But he says, "En lecha adam she'en lo sha'a." There's no person without a timepiece. And he says, why do the rabbis use it? V'ro'im kama sha'ot shedorshim shelo le'atriach hatzibur. That was, for the people, it was a breath of fresh air. Finally, the rabbis have a watch, and we could tell them already, yes, we were talking for an hour and a half. You should stop, right? So he says, everybody uses it. So, but it didn't stop there, because after Rabbi Eisenstadt, this is in the 1700s, writes that it's okay to use the watch on Shabbat. They were talking about pocket watch. There were no innovations. Every generation brought, the winding. You have the winding. You have self-winding watch, batteries, atomic batteries, solar batteries. Then you have, when I was a kid, there were the Casio watches with the kinetic, right? And you have the calculators on it, and now you have, of course, iWatches and all that, and all these, and with each and every one of them, after the debate, eventually, it goes under the radar. It's okay. Yeah, some people say don't use them, but most people do use them.
What is the violation? I don't understand.
It's not about. One second. What I'm trying to show is why did the rabbi say with the watch, intuitively they wanted to forbid, but then practically they went for it. Where with the umbrella, intuitively they said it's forbidden, and they went with it. Even though there were many rabbis that we'll see who said it's not a problem. So my question is, what is the dynamics of halakha? It's not the actual outcome, but the dynamics of what led there. So I think what really dictated the whole thing, the approach of the rabbis, is, and this we'll see in many other cases, is that when the rabbis identify a problem, they will try to provide a solution. And when they don't see a problem, there's no need for a solution. The classical example I gave once is aguna, a woman whose husband is missing or is refusing to give her a get. In both cases, you could find ways to undo the marriage and let the woman get married again. However, the rabbis see a problem with a missing husband. They say the husband is missing, is missing in action or whatever. We'll have to find a way to release that woman. But when the husband is present, they say, we could force him to give a get. If it takes 20, 30 years, it's okay. We don't see a problem. Meaning they don't see what the woman is going through. Same thing happened with the watches and with the umbrellas. What is more problematic for people? When you tell them you can't use a watch, when you tell them you don't use an umbrella. Think of how attached people are to their watches. I don't wear a watch, and everybody I'm against it, and because I have magnetic energy that disables it.
You had the watch.
Yeah, but people really, we're obsessed with watches. We don't call them watches. We call them timepieces. To say that we own a piece of time because we can control time. The thing about the prices of watches, right? It's a status symbol. Regular people regularly buy watches that range from the hundreds to tens of thousands of dollars, but the most expensive pieces, which are regularly sold, Philippe Patek and others, like in the millions of dollars. And there's one that goes for $26 million, right? Meanwhile, I searched for the most expensive umbrella, $50,000, right? And people were making fun of it. It says you put a tracking device on it. The most expensive ones that are sold on a regular basis, $500, even if there's one $3,000 free delivery. If you pay $3,000 for an umbrella, you get free delivery, right? So the point is really how important it is to people. I got from my Brit Mitzvah, I wrote that, I don't know how many watches I got, they were all broke eventually. Not one umbrella. Can you imagine the husband who comes home for his wife, it's your 25th anniversary, I got you an umbrella? He will end up in the ICU with the umbrella stabs all over his and you go into a house, you leave the umbrellas at the door. Can you imagine everybody taking their watch? So the point is, people were not willing to hear from the rabbis that they cannot use the watch on Shabbat, and the rabbis themselves were not willing to let it go. It's important. Meanwhile, with the umbrella, he says, "What's the problem?" So when it rains, put a coat on. Walk to the synagogue. So what's going to happen, right? What happens to our umbrellas anyway? You either lose them, or someone else takes them by mistake, or someone steals them. That's what happens to all umbrellas. They end up in the big umbrella heaven, and the sky. So the point is really the willingness of the rabbis to see the problem as a problem. So now, fast forward to today, there are certain rabbis who say that you could use umbrellas on Shabbat. Most significantly, Rabbi Israel Lipschitz, who wrote the commentary Tiferet Israel on the Mishnah, and the Hatam Sofer, Rabbi Moshe Sofer, who usually was a more strict person, but what this was, you could say, a lenient, and Rabbi Yosef Mishash, that maybe we should, make a Shabbat umbrella and call it Mishash, Mitriya Shel Shabbat, in initials. But we really feel today no, he says it's okay. If people need it, he says it's okay. I'll go through his teshuvah. But the point is really, if you look at today's situation, people in the past lived in small cities, usually in cold weather, and they had a short walking distance to the synagogue. So you walk over to the synagogue, no problem. And if you can't go, it's really terrible, you're probably better staying home because you're going to get a cold. Today, people live all over the world. People live in suburbs where they have to walk an hour sometimes to the synagogue. And in hot weather, like if you were in Colombia, we had 3 hours of rain every day. So like pouring tropical rain. Jews live there. In New Jersey or New York, when during the summer, when you have rain showers, it's 100 degrees, 105 degrees, pouring rain. You need to walk half an hour to the synagogue, and you put the coat on, and it's either if it's a heavy coat, it's terrible, and if it's the raincoat, it's plastic that doesn't breathe. You boil under the thing. And meanwhile, if you take an umbrella, you could use it, open it, and close it. So here, the problem is it has to be reassessed and readdressed. But of course, the problem will be, how do you convey it to the public? So we'll talk about it. I think the idea to create a Shabbat umbrella probably would be to emblazon it with on one side, you say Shabbat umbrella, and on the other side, it says, put that stone down. To make sure they don't stone you before you get to the synagogue. Okay, we'll continue B'ezrat Hashem tomorrow.